Part 1, Chapter 3, Eldritch Temperament. A handful of quiet hours had passed, and I found myself stirring on top of my blanket in a foggy state. The nap I fell victim to had released me, and I sat up in bleary confusion, somewhat alerted. I don't remember anything leading up to my awakening, just the nagging sensation of someone watching over me. My head rolled from side to side, searching for anything, but the room was dark. My lips smacked, my mind groggy, and my body heavy with the claws of sleep dug deep. I hung my feet over the edge of my bed, readying myself to stand. The first 2 steps upright caused me to sway, but I quickly found my balance. A fierce yawn sent hot shivers up and down my spine, rippling my muscles with a quivering expansion. All of my skin felt tacky and hot, like a campfire had been lit under my bed and slowly cooked me. A quick glance toward my window revealed it open, as I left it, but there seemed to be no airflow. The clock on my nightstand displayed no time, and I had this eerie sense of floating that woke my mind faster than my body was ready for. I grumbled. Why the hell is it so hot? Right now, the kitchen was calling my name. A murky glass of tap water was the unfortunate remedy to this dry throat. Upon exiting my bedroom and standing over the railing, I rubbed my eyes hard to ensure they were focused. The couch was vacant and the house was still, lifeless. I could hear my dad snoring just below me. For a second, I thought I heard someone talking. I leaned forward, placing one hand on the rail and listened closely, but there was nothing. Then, the moment I turned toward the stairs to descend, I heard it again. Whispering. In all reality, I've had auditory hallucinations before. I've even woken in the middle of the night and heard a full-blown conversation coming from my roof, and I've seen shadows move behind the veil of darkness. Dreams project into naked consciousness or anxiety. Reasons or excuses, it didn't matter because I've long since determined these oddities to be nothing but my imagination. By the declaration of peers and teachers, I chalk it up to my mind never stopping its desperate churn, keeping itself occupied. I filled my lungs with humid air and got a taste of that good old rot. Jeez, nothing like a nighttime heat wave, I whispered to myself, realizing the hotter it is, the more prevalent the garbage stink will be. Maybe it's another bloated dead raccoon in the attic. Maybe the basement this time. The first step of descending the stairs was a loud one, but I wasn't worried. My dad is a heavy sleeper when he's sober, and I know he didn't stop at 1 beer after he got home. I rounded the corner at the bottom and casually walked into the kitchen. Dark blindness didn't inhibit me from arriving at the fridge. The house was small enough to where I could confidently navigate with only half my senses. At the sink, I reached for a clean cup on the drying rack when suddenly a loud grumbling noise broke the silence behind me. I jumped, but quickly reassured myself that it was only my dad and his obnoxious snoring from his room. Why am I so on edge? I thought to myself. I filled my glass with metallic water and guzzled it down in a few gulps. I then collected the sticky mucus from freshly shaken off sleep and spat it down the drain, running some more water over it and filling the glass halfway again. As the glass touched my lips for the second time, I stopped. A hint in the silence that something was off. Skeptically, my brow raised and I held my breath. Setting the glass down next to the sink, I opened the fridge. The warm light poured out onto the floor, casting deep shadows in a brief area. I tilted my head back to finish when I nearly choked at the sound of an abrupt rustling noise behind me. I spun quickly, spitting that last sip back into the glass and pulling it away from my face. Heart racing, I peered into the out-of-reach darkness. In my upward peripheral, while looking right, I caught a glimpse of something. My neck tilted as my eyes tracked up at the railing 10 or so feet above and away from where I stood. Behind the rails was just darkness. Yet, it was unique. A black sheet darker than everything else around it. True, living darkness. My eyes rapidly scanned the area as confusion and fear rose within until I blinked. At that moment, a mere fraction of a second, Whatever I was seeing was gone. The atmosphere changed all at once, and it felt like everything reset. Eyes silently darting, bound fist by my side. Reality quelled my strumming heartbeat. There's nothing. I set my empty cup in the sink and adapted to the feeling of unease. I had almost settled down when the light inside the fridge went out, and the rumble of its cooling mechanisms fell deathly silent. Fixated now on the open door as cold air continued to glide past me, I rested my hand on it and opened it wider, peering in. I raised an eyebrow in confusion. I pushed the little switch inside multiple times, but nothing happened. It was dead. I closed the door gently and turned around, viewing the black for all that it was, unsure of what to do next. Tiptoeing through the dark, I walked toward the front door where the panel of switches was located. I flicked all of them, but nothing changed. What the heck happened to the power? I asked myself. My eyes had adjusted well enough to make my way back to the kitchen and find the miscellaneous junk drawer. All the while I kept my head low, making sure not to let my eyes wander to the railing again. I sifted as quietly as I could through this drawer, rummaging past screwdrivers, nails, thumbtacks, a single spool of thread, masking tape, a small sewing kit with a variety of needles, and a pocket Bible. All the way in the back, I located the handheld flashlight I was looking for. My fingers wrapped tightly around it and rotated until my thumb landed on the button. The beam shined bright at my command. A shimmering circle cast to the floor, giving me that sense of fragile control that I urgently lacked. I tried to close the drawer that I had just now remembered had a broken slide wheel, meaning I had to quietly slam it shut. Now, flashlight in hand, I dragged my feet over to my dad's room. Walking into his room was like walking into a motel room on the first day. Bare, with almost no personality inside, and a sense that a lot has occurred within the walls, and none of it wanted anything to do with my presence. Inside was a full-sized bed directly in front of you, with the headboard against the wall beneath a wide window, a dresser and a large mirror to the left, and a closet and chair on the right. I calmly made my way over to the right side of his bed with the flashlight aimed downward. "Dad, wake up," I whispered. His response was nothing more than a loud snort. "Dad," I shouted, still no response. I sighed loudly, then had an idea. Lifting the flashlight up to my chest, I shined the ray into his eyes. Immediately, he jerked around and his eyes burst wide open. He forcefully sat up while baring a clenched fist. "Who the fuck's in my house?" he shouted. I pulled back a step. "Whoa, hey, it's just me," I said, shining the light under my chin. Lowering his fist and panting slightly, he drearily looked in my direction. "Jesus, Skim, I thought you were someone else," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes hard. Who else would I be?" I offered a confused stare. "Forget it. What are you doing?" he dizzily questioned. "I just came down to get a drink and I think the power went off. Can you check the breaker?" I asked. Lucidity slowly crept back into his brain. A snarl. "Why don't you? You already have the flashlight. What's the point of waking me up?" "It's in the basement. I don't want to go down there alone." I chuckled nervously, hoping he would sympathize. He scratched his head and yawned loudly. I added, "Plus, I don't even know how to fix it." He grumbled, then lazily reached over to the floor lamp next to his bed and pulled the cord. The light blipped on, bright as can be. There was an awkward silence where he just looked at me, the light clearly bothering his eyes. "But the kitchen," I started, "is on its own fuse. Did you run the microwave when the door was open?" "No, I said I got a drink." "Don't get smart with me. You obviously did something to cause this," he said in his gravelly voice. My lips pursed. "Okay." "Just fucking go to the basement and find the switch that's different than the others, and push it all the way back and then flip it forward. A 5-year-old could do it. His condescending tone didn't go unnoticed. Can you just go do it? I don't want to mess it up and cause a bigger problem. His frustration grew. You've already caused enough of a problem by waking me up. Now, go fix it before you actually piss me off. But, Kimberly, I swear to God, all you do is fucking whine. Now! He abruptly jerked the lamp string again, making me flinch. The springs rustled beneath his torqued body and creaked as he settled back under the blanket. My eyes fell to the floor and a dense weight burdened my shoulders. Glossy-eyed, I gripped the flashlight tighter and backed out of the room. I paused and collected myself, playing out the coming motions in my head before advancing to the front door. There, I slipped on my shoes and tried the porch light again, hoping against hope that it would work. But it didn't. The front door swung open and I was met by obscure darkness beyond the little porch. My nose crinkled with annoyance as I braced myself. Sure, send the 15-year-old into the dark, alone, to fix the problem. What a contradicting ass. I mumbled to myself as I took the first treacherous steps out the door. The flashlight aimed directly at the ground in front of me cast such a low short-range beam that I couldn't even see the tree outline only a car's length from the side of the house. Instantly, I was greeted by a cool breeze that, hopefully, is stealing the heat from my bedroom right now. Indefinitely aware of how loud my steps were, the porch boards screamed under my weight. Each scrape of the sole, every rustle of my pajama pants, and every breath I took hit the walls of the woods and were sucked into the endless abyss. Which is it, Dad? You say, don't go outside at night or when I'm not home. But oh, it's perfectly fine for me to creep around with this flashlight, just so long as you're good and tipsy enough not to give a damn. I huffed, turning at the bottom of the steps. I moved cautiously away from the porch and kept close to the side of the house, using it as a defensive wall, knowing that the only mystery was the forest to my right. General apprehension was fueled by the thought of that darker dark beyond the railing. Again, I had to tell myself it was just an everyday hallucination or whatever. Nothing new, nothing to be afraid of. My toes scraped against the dirt and sand as I reached the back of the house and rounded the corner tightly. Just a few feet ahead of me, attached to the house beneath both of our vertically adjacent windows, was a rusted red bulkhead. My light illuminated this death trap, and my eyes wandered once more. Shivering, I rotated my head slowly, peering into the trees that stand coated in thick, murky ink. No moon or stars were present tonight, giving the entire world a feeling of abandonment. My stare returned to the task at hand. Corroded hinges and chipping paint represented the door's outward appearance, perfect set dressing for a bad horror movie. I can't believe this, I thought to myself. That steady wind picked up again and whispered through the leaves, beckoning all the fears within me to animate and take over my subconscious. The shifting leaves skipped across the ground, creating the illusion of 100 tiny footsteps running in erratic circles. Skimming the tree line with his petty beam, I focused hard on the dark trunks of varying thickness. Slowly, the rounded beam dragged left, reaching the wide break of a carved footpath I've traveled many times during the day. However, at the edge of the beam where the trees started again, a human shape warbled. Snapping to the tree, all shadows frozen on my spotlight. Alone, my mind told me. I was entirely alone. But some putrid cringe in my chest screamed distress. A tiny fragile voice deep inside drew a torso peering out from the birch trunk. Salivating, I swallowed hard and locked onto what I believed to be a person. Then a sudden decline in hostility. The pounding of my heart climbing my throat began to recede, and what I thought I saw in the forest was gone. It had never been there. I exhaled a chilled breath and returned my attention to the bulkhead. You're okay, I assured in a hush. The loud rusted squeak of the hinges wavered across the lifeless forest. Crouching slightly, I shined the light into the hole, mouth dry again. Every nerve in my body told me to just go back inside, but I couldn't back away. I'd come so far. The beam wobbled and shook along with my unsteady hand. The steps screeched under my weight, forcing me to stop and wait for any sign of undesired accompaniment to show itself. It was so quiet as I dipped my head under the foundation, peeking through squinted eyes at the abundant shadows. A cold spike made itself comfortable in my chest as I detailed the vague shapes of things left behind. An old nightstand, kitchen table, some shelving and scrap wood, a tire and rusted tools, just a bunch of miscellaneous garbage never to be used again. The fuse box was no more than 25 feet away, a direct line of sight despite all the clutter, but my vision was limited at this angle. I hardly ever go down here, so I didn't know what to expect. Much too aware of my own heavy breaths, I tried to silence them as much as I could, but the stifling only caused my lungs to sharpen. With one final step, my feet met dirt as I fully submerged myself in the crushing black. My golden ray of security was the only thing keeping me from running like a scared child. At the bottom of the steps was a little beaded string hanging from above, the light switch. I tugged it carefully, and, of course, nothing happened. Getting really irritated at these circumstances, I used my beam to check it out. There I saw the base of a soft white light bulb inserted in the socket, but the actual dome was nothing but shark teeth. Following the clue, I examined the dirt floor and saw the shards below. Shit. The darkness surrounded me at every angle, seeming more dangerous than before. Then, like a flashback, I thought back to every event tonight. It really occurred to me that this sequence of oddities was more than circumstantial weirdness. It almost felt like a dream. Out of nowhere, a powerful nausea punched me in the gut, which forced a dry wheeze to escape my lips. Doubled over in sickness, I exclaimed, "Oh man, what is this?" The flashlight trembled between my fingers, and the grip was loosened. With my head hunched forward, I directed my eyes upwards, searching. Within a few seconds, the feeling leveled out to a general upset stomach, and I choked on a burning cough. Regaining my posture, I jolted forward for the box in an attempt to get it done and get the hell out of here. 3 feet was all I covered when a loud buzzing erupted in my ears. I slowed. My knees began knocking together. I stopped altogether and turned around, looking towards the only exit. This is real, and something is very intentionally wrong. The longer I stared at the small gap under the house, the more my eyes began to blur. I felt dizzy, like I was going to pass out. The buzzing scraped my skull, but for some reason it felt familiar to me. Like the vibrations were always there, my whole life, and I only now was questioning its existence. "Get it together, Kim," my throat rumbled. It's a panic attack or something, that's all. My eyes caught movement. Not a shadow wavering from my light or any hair just above my brows. This movement came from the bulk door closing. Horror erupted and nailed my feet to the floor for a moment. It descended completely and impossibly silent without any influence that I could see. A slam. An absolute, unfiltered fear swallowed me whole. A scream got caught in my throat. No movement triggered. No desperate leap to hit the ceiling and wake my dad. I felt like if I made any noise whatsoever, I would die. Turning again, I shined the light in every direction, trying to keep the darkness at bay. As calm as anyone could be in a situation like this, I lifted my feet and took baby steps toward the bulkhead, abandoning my purpose altogether. I managed to get within a few feet of the steps and spun to face the center of the room. One step backward, then another. The third step would bring me to the base of the stairs, but instead, my back was met with something solid, something tall. I froze in place. It let out the faintest of whimpers. My lips loosened, and my teeth clamped tight. A sharp breath brushed the top of my head. I screeched, jerking forward and spinning around. My beam drowned the stairs in fickle light. There was a shape, not too dissimilar to the one by my bedroom door, but much, much taller. A steel ball jammed in my throat, withholding the next scream of terror. It had 2 piercing yellow eyes, and in a blink, it disappeared. A shudder down my back sensed the same presence again. This time, I didn't shout or move away. Instead, I shut my eyes, not by my own will, but through some internal defense. I saw nothing, and my blood began to rumble. I could hear something growling steadily all around me. More talking. No, not so casual. These voices were in pain. It grew louder, drowning out the static that previously inhabited my mind. It sounded like 100 dying curdles beckoning me, insidiously calling my name. Everything was spinning, and for a brief second, I felt as though I was no longer in this world. Lost. Dead. Every slurring syllable was nonsense, except for the final 2. A weary, docile voice purred. My mind exploded. That internal combustion erupted into my reality. My hand released the flashlight and my legs propelled me up the stairs. I rammed my head and shoulders into the steel bulk, pounding on it with clenched fists. "Let me out! Please!" When I rammed it again, the door opened a little. I pushed against it with all my strength. It was way heavier than before, like someone had covered it in bags of sand. As soon as the door flew open, I tripped my way up the steps and flopped onto the grass. I hit the ground hard, but got up as fast as I could. As I rounded the tight corners, my feet slid and fumbled, clambering upright like a rabid animal. I felt the icy presence of something behind me, gawking with ill intent. I barely managed to rip open the porch door and burst through the front. Locking the many various deadbolts and key locks slowed me down, but once those were in place, safety quelled the chaos. Taking just a second to breathe, I glanced toward my dad's room. The door was open, and I could see him sleeping. But just behind his headboard, I could also see out the window into the backyard, directly over the bulkhead door. I didn't see anything from here. Then my eyes shot up to the railing. Again, the coast seemed clear, and I started to feel the patronizing grip of mild insanity. I moved slowly, aware of every corner and every shadow, still unsure if this was real or a dream. After all, my dreams have always presented themselves as a convincing alternative to life. I made my way up the staircase toward my bedroom, heart still crashing against my ribs and throat burning from painful shrieks. Wails of terror my dad obviously didn't hear, which makes me question this reality even more. Thankfully, the ceiling light above my bed shimmered on. A chill. The room was ice cold. In fact, the whole house seemed to drop by 30 degrees. I closed the door behind me and moved to my window to shut it. I couldn't help myself. Stupidly, I looked down to the ground, and even with how dark it was from here, I could see the bulk directly below, and it was closed. It's... I whispered. My head jerked back, too afraid to look again. I shut the window quietly, locked it, and pulled the shades down to the base. I spun around and darted for my safe, warm bed. Sitting straight up, I gawked at my door for a minute or two, then my eyes focused on the window, just watching. Paranoid doesn't even begin to describe my sense of being. No matter how many times I repeated the words anxiety, imagination, and trick of the darkness, I couldn't rationalize enough to settle. Strange occurrences in my life had happened before. In fact, I'd almost say I was used to abnormalities and unexplainable sensations or visuals. Even with that considered, the air has been different lately. The weight of my own body became more and more apparent as I waited up. With each passing hour, my body became lower and lower until I was lying down again, and sleep reclaimed my mind.